Honorary Claudia Bandion-Ortner, thank you for joining us here in Rome at the Symposium on Cultural Diplomacy and Religion and for your keynote speech. We would like to ask you a few questions in order to hear your thoughts on some current issues. So, how would you define cultural diplomacy?
Yeah, cultural diplomacy is a kind of soft diplomacy, I would say. It's not the diplomacy between ambassadors, it's the diplomacy, a step lower, I would say. And cultural, yes. Also, religious dialogue, interreligious dialogue, is a kind of cultural diplomacy.
How do you think that cultural diplomacy can solve problems and raise understanding between nations? And can you give us some examples of that?
Yes, I think the cultural diplomacy nowadays is so important because we are living we have the globalization in the world, and because also I think of the new medias. The world is very well interconnected, and therefore all these, how should I say this, all this kind of soft diplomacy, which is not on the ambassador level, became so important. For example, I can tell you some really nice stories how dialogue or interreligious, intercultural dialogue can work. For example, there is an imam and a pastor in Nigeria. They were combatants. They had a fight in northern Nigeria, and they were not religious people yet. And then they fought together. Through dialogue. Now they are friends, and together they are working for peace in this region, and very successfully. And that's also a kind of diplomacy. But they are no ambassadors. They are religious leaders. And that's really a story of success.
Thank you. You talked a lot about how religion can influence cultural diplomacy. How do you think politics and religion can influence each other?
Yes, I think the relationship between politics and religions should be very open and transparent. And religious leaders and politicians and policymakers should work together in future much more than before. That is, our organization KC tries to enable this dialogue between politicians and religious leaders. But we should not, the politicians should not influence the agendas of the religion groups, religion communities, and vice versa. The religious leaders should not manipulate the political agendas. There should be, of course, separation, but they should talk with each other. And I think religious leaders should be involved in policy making, because I think together they can succeed, of course.
Do you think it's possible to avoid this tendency of religious leaders and political leaders to try and influence each other? And how would you suggest?
Yes, I think it's very important that they do not influence their agendas. But they should listen. They should listen to the other groups. There should be a mutual dialogue, a mutual understanding. And especially in times, nowadays, it's so important in regions, yes, like Syria or Central Africa, that religious leaders and politicians have really a candid dialogue.
Definitely. Thank you. What actions would you undertake to spread the general message of this conference? What actions would you undertake to spread the general message of this conference?
Yes. talk.
Yeah.
I'm from a
talking.
center of dialogue. I think the best thing is to talk and yeah.
You were mentioning Austria as an example of very successful country in terms of interreligious dialogue. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, Vienna was always a place, a golden place for dialogue, I would say. Not only for interreligious dialogue, also many politicians met in Vienna and they had very important conferences there and there were very important agreements and yes, it was always a city for peace building. I don't know why, but I think it's the atmosphere in Vienna, I don't know.
Definitely.
But in Austria, there are very interesting interfaith groups, there's a good interfaith work. And there are no tensions between the religious groups. And, for example, in Austria, we have a very interesting law, Islamic law, since 100 years. And this law facilitated a really peaceful coexistence. And I think that was really a successful initiative. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and it was an honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure for me to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.